Okay, I'm going to pick up here where we left off in the last video of looking at our centered square, 6 inches by 6 inches, and going over a few techniques for drawing lines within this square, how to manage our kind of line information, get some line weight, and set you up for doing the first in-class exercise. I'm going to work with my lead pointer like you are, so I'll have to sharpen it pretty often, keep that tip nice and controlled. And the first important tip here is to consider where you do your measurements every time you come in to do a new drawing. Now, if we've defined our boundary and we know where our work area is, then the rest of this paper is a little easier to manage and deal with in terms of cleaning it up. Now, I might have a secondary boundary on this one if I want to display it as a piece of work that's another inch or two outside of what I'm going to draw here. So that's something to consider. You can even draw it on the page pretty quickly. Give myself an inch so it's nice and quick to draw. That provides me with plenty of room if I need to trim off paper because it gets damaged, or if there's measuring marks and notes as I'm working on the drawings. This is always something important to consider. I'm going to do real quick just a series of light lines around here on all the edges. What I'll try to do with that is avoid putting any new marks inside that area. There's already some in there, but those will be easy to erase and clean up. So now I'll do my measuring, and this will be similar to the exercise you're asked to do in the first part of class. So watch this before you go to class, and it should be easy to pick up. But basically, we're borrowing some instructions from an artist, Sol LeWitt, who made a pretty good career out of providing instructions for how to create drawings. So that's really important with this exercise, is first reading through the instructions and sketching them out, understanding what they're asking you to do, and then making a plan for how you'll proceed. So a few things I know from the exercise is that we're going to divide the paper into 4 quadrants, and then each quadrant is going to have a different arrangement of parallel lines and different orientations to make different densities. A lot of difference here, and that's an important part of everything we're learning in this representation class, is how to make differences to make a difference in your visual communication. So the first thing I'm going to do is just split my square up into 4 quadrants and do that because I can locate it out here on the very outer edge and measure outside of my space. It's a little close there, but it should be fine. And since I know it's a 6-inch square, come in and find my midpoint at 3 inches. Same thing vertically. I don't need a lot of measurements. I don't need to measure both sides. I can trust my tools. And then just really quickly draw a light line there. I'm drawing it very light because I don't know what it's going to become later on in the drawing or how I want it to read. I don't know if I want like a very strong line right down the center. Maybe I want it to blend in later, so we'll keep it real light until we know. Alright, so there I have 4 quadrants, and I know first parts of the exercise are to draw a bunch of parallel lines in the either horizontal or vertical direction. I'm going to start with vertical since that's what I remember. What I want to do there is use my space up here outside of my drawings, all the way outside of that 1-inch boundary. Get my ruler lined up, and then I'm going to probably get in your way a little bit on this so I can see. But I'm going to do pretty good spacing of 1/4 inch each, and be really precise about making a single tick mark right at those measurements. Now, it's important here to take your time and make sure these are as close and accurate as possible. And you might want to make a little bit sharper pencil. Use a really fine 2H or HB so you can maintain that precision all the way across. And if you want a little extra practice, you can go down to 1/8. It will definitely create more potential for visual distortion and give you a lot of extra work and practice with these tools, which is helpful in getting familiar with them for the next several weeks where you'll be using them heavily. I'm going to go ahead and do my horizontal measurements as well in the same way, because I know we'll have a bunch of them. And same type of thing, you want to be as straight on and flat with the ruler as possible, so that you're not marking a little bit to one side or the other of the line. Now, it's bound to happen a little bit, especially when you're first starting, so don't worry too much if you find mistakes later as you're going, but try to recognize them as you begin and say, okay, put that line a little bit in the wrong place, and I'm going to erase my tick mark and come back and do it again. And that way you avoid major errors later on down the road. Okay, so I've made all those marks really outside of my drawing, and I can use my tools to bring them into the space of the drawing when I need them. But as I said before, it's much easier to trim this piece of paper later and make it nice for presentation. Now that might be super important for this in-class exercise, but it's probably going to be pretty important for your work that you produce week to week out of class. And keeping in mind, you're going to have to sharpen this up every once in a while, dab off some of that extra graphite. And now we get to use the benefits of our tools, which is having a mechanical series of operations to draw all these lines relatively quickly. So again, you want to be pretty straight on, make sure your tick mark's lined up, make sure this is pressing hard against that parallel surface edge, and then just going to draw light lines, trying to keep them nicely within the box. I'm not overdrawing here, so I have to do a lot of erasing later. Just starting and stopping right on that darker outer border line. Giving my pencil a little bit of a spin as I draw. This is something that you develop over time and think about. It's hard to make it go away. You start doing it all the time. Something to consider while doing this is that the repetition and precision and rigor that you're practicing is very important for your development as a designer and architect, and that you find ways to both take the time to see clearly and precisely, as well as produce and make clear and precise things. And what you want to find in doing this is a rhythm and a pace that allows you to be precise, accurate, but also get done in a reasonable amount of time. And that's going to take a little practice. I'm going to build it up over the next few weeks. But it can go pretty quick. You can see there that I have very consistent spacing in my parallel lines, pretty consistent darkness and lightness. I'm getting a little bit of a wobble. It's not something I practice every day, so even I'll have some separation from the skills I used to have when I did this all the time. So you'll build those up, and it'll get better each week with time. We'll do this exercise a few times to help us out. I'm going to go ahead and move on to my horizontals. This is where I can use this one here. I'm actually going to draw up from down here and use the bottom edge. A little bit of shadow there, so something to watch out for. But I think I'm close enough that it's pretty good. You want to make sure you got a good hold on your pencil, that you're not too much of an angle. You're going right along that edge. And as you get used to your tools, this will go faster and faster. As you kind of just slide, hit the point, move along. I find this to be a bit meditative, like breathing. It's important as you do it to remember to breathe. Suspense of seeing it all finished can be a little difficult to get through. Just breathe. Let yourself be absorbed in the work for a little while. Let your mind occupy the lines and think about how you're tracking points through space. In a sense, I define these starting points, places of location and measurement, which I am then translating along a vector, create a line. So I've got a little bit of a measurement error there. It's okay, we'll just keep drawing. So once we've done this, fixing it might cause more problems than just drawing through it and working to get better along the way. And that's going to happen as you're learning this as well. You're gonna make mistakes. That's okay, it's all new, I'm assuming, to most of you. And those mistakes are just a part of learning. The important thing is that we recognize them and we keep persevering through those mistakes to get better. And this is a skill and a lesson that we learn here by drawing the lines, but that translates to everything that you will do while you're in school and in the profession. So it's not too bad, but you can see here I had a little bit of a double line there from my measurements, starting in slightly different places from my midpoint. I'm going to be okay with it. You may also notice that I did not follow the instructions. And I'm going to leave that part up to you. I'm just using this as an example to show you how to use these tools. There's only one more thing I really want to talk about with this, and that is working at other angles, right? The horizontal and the vertical here are pretty straightforward. These two tools do it well. And the triangles also got the capability to help us out with some other angles. We can do that 45-degree angle there, or I can bring in my 30, 60, 90 triangle if I wanted something a little more steep or a little more shallow. These work in both directions and also both orientations. So you can get pretty much any angle you need. You can even do some fun ones like this, for more complex angles. And you'll find a lot of this stuff in Francis Ching's book on design drawing, ways to make your tools do a lot of extra work for you. So this is something to explore in how it helps you draw. I could use this, even though it's not a very stable thing, to draw some 45s at that angle for some reason. I think it gets most interesting when you start to combine them in ways like this, where I now have an angle here at about 15 degrees from the vertical. I'm going to stick with my 45 for this because it relates to your exercise. Now, once you've done the horizontal and vertical lines, again, yours is going to look different because there's different effects in each quadrant. So make sure you pay attention to the exercise. Then you're asked to do a series of diagonal lines at a 45-degree angle. This is something you shouldn't have to measure anything for. And to avoid measuring at all, we want to pick kind of a starting point or an origin. I'm going to use this corner down here. Now, I guess I should make my notes outside of the area that I don't want to delete, but if I do it very lightly, I can remind myself here. This is my origin, which means I'm going to do all alignments from these two edges. Not measurements, but alignments. So if I wanted to draw some 45-degree angle marks across the whole page, could and should hit that corner and that corner exactly. Let's find out. Let's see how good I was at measuring. Oh, a little bit off there. It's probably a lot to do with me working at a very oblique angle to this. And if you come in and you're working directly above and this is at a proper height, or you're at a good height for kind of being centered on the drawing, your measurement accuracy will be a lot higher to work with, but that's okay. If that happens, right? It's inaccurate. We recognize that. It's probably a little bit of a mistake on my part there, but I can't undo it. I can't erase any of this. I can't step backwards. So instead, I'm going to work forwards from here. And that's why I've defined this origin point down there. Remember to sharpen your lead pointer often. I already see some smudging happening, getting a little dull. So that origin point down the bottom allows me to decide where am I going to pick the most accurate condition and let everything else build off from there. And so as I work with this, I'm only going to use these intersections down at the bottom. Those points that come from the intersection of two lines are my place that I'm going to say is correct and accurate, and I'm going to let every other every other line, build from those. And we're going to see where my tool or measurement inaccuracies are. Now it is possible, since these are tools made kind of for basic beginning drawing, that there's some looseness, some wobble, or some manufacturing defect in your tool. So pay attention to that if you're seeing major inconsistencies, but you come back and do things like, oh, that one's right, that one's right, and that one's right. They're just like at a weird angle. It's very hard to see. That might be something in this being a little wobbly, or maybe you're putting a lot of pressure on it while you're drawing. So trying to like let this just sit while you draw. Don't push on it, don't lean on it. Same with your other tools. Maybe it's possible that there's something like on your triangle that's keeping it a little pushed up, or something on the edge of this. So it can also be a good check to examine and say, okay, where am I maybe having these inaccuracies that I can fix outside of my control. Now, if there's something really wrong with your tool, you might have to get it replaced. And while these are nice to have, because they kind of speed things up a bit, so you don't have to worry about this piece moving around on us. It's pretty stable. You can always grab a pretty inexpensive T-square from the art store and use that in the meantime, even on a table, maybe with some Bristol or illustration board down below it as a nice surface to get through the work until the main tools are repaired. As you can see, you get a little bit of inconsistency, but they're fairly consistent in their inconsistency. So something up here is probably just like slightly off from my angle and push that line out a little bit. And so they're all just a little high, hitting in those corners. But down here, they're all accurate, and they stay pretty accurate all the way till the end when we start to perceive it. And if I was trying to correct all of that by like manually lining them up, each one would wiggle a little differently than the other, and that's going to cause a lot more mess in my drawing than just using this reference line as my place for all of my starting points and building from there. Since I'm not following the instructions of the exercise exactly, I'm going to have a little bit of fun with this, but I know there are a couple more pitfalls that can happen, and so I'll cover one more area of that. Now what I want you to notice is like the consistency of the parallel nature of lines in any one direction. Right? Again, that's why there's no like free connecting of things right now when I want these parallel lines. Now if my goal was to like play around and do some design of the drawing, right, then I could totally do this if it's only going to be a single line. So I'm going to make this a strong line. So really make sure your ruler's held down well so it doesn't slide. So I was going to do that, and then maybe pick another connection in this direction between 2 points. These don't have a parallel relationship with anything else, at least not now. And they might a little bit later, but at this stage, they're on their own, they're unique. That's when that's okay, because I don't need them to match up with all of their neighbors. But if I want them to match up with all their neighbors, I gotta use the tools, or else they're gonna start to look a little gnarly. Now, what I wanna do here is come back and reestablish connection with my quadrants. They're still there, but they're getting a little bit lost. And so I want to do one more series of lines in this direction to make this quadrant the most densely packed with lines. And this can get a little challenging to be a little challenging to keep in mind where to start and stop. So some things we could do, we could use some tape to help guide us. That can be a way to work on it, or maybe the ruler. But what I really want to be able to do is see and remind myself where to stop drawing lines. So this big one's probably going to get in the way. I'm going to grab my smaller ruler. You could use your graphic scale. Actually, let's use that. Let's use architect scale, because that's nice. It's a little sliding, so maybe it won't work out as well. Sorry about that. So use this one. And I can find, there's my point from my quadrant and my quadrant there. So what I want is just something visually aligning that, it'll stay up here on the page. And in fact, if it's sliding around, right, it's a good chance you can just take some paper, or some tape, sorry, and do a quick thing like that to help us see it, remind us where it's at. You know, it might even be enough to take a little tape in a part that you're not going to draw over and find out where's that coming through there. Right? It's easy because I made a mistake here. It's that one right there. So I can just stick some tape. And these help with being a visual aid to remind me to make sure I'm not overdrawing. You know, it might also help to come in, identify this point a little bit first, and get a good starting line. Now, same type of thing, I want to use this edge as my base edge. So once I've drawn that first line, every other one after that, I'm going to draw. This is going to be tricky. I can't get this in any useful way. This one might be enough to help. Right, you can use this triangle in all sorts of directions. My head's going to be a little bit in your way for this, but it'll be sped up to go quick. And what I'm really looking to do, make sure don't draw over this middle line. So I don't want to have to erase. Erasing is very challenging when you start to get a high density of lines because you can't find space between them with the big erasers at least. As you can see down here, these are meeting exactly at the point between three lines intersecting with the fourth line. And that's what I'm looking for. I want that consistency all along that edge. And if there's a little bit of a wiggle here, well, this is pretty good. A little mess there where they don't quite line up. I'm going to be okay with that because it will still look very consistent due to the extreme parallel nature of all the lines and this more pronounced edge being very precise. I think I'm doing a pretty good job. Sticking with that line. You could put some tape on there, but sometimes it'll mess with your graphite, so I don't want to do that. Instead, I just want to try to remind myself that that's there. And same type of thing. Now here, I can make a new choice. I could use this edge, but since this edge is where I'm actually having a lot of air, I might choose to use this edge right here as my place to draw from, because this is going to have inconsistency no matter what. So I'm going to try that and see what happens. I'm going to make a nice crisp line. I'll make a nice crisp line in here before my camera stops working. Alright, so that helped it really look nice and clean and precise in that quadrant. And your drawing's going to look a little different. I think it'll have one set of lines here, a grid here, grid plus a diagonal here, and then a double diagonal there. But that should be a good amount of stuff to get you started. If you do have to erase, then this eraser shield is your friend. You should have a big bar eraser. I think mine has been donated or lost over time to students, but I do have an eraser here on my pencil, as well as other pencils around that just have erasers to them will work. So if you need to clean up, say, let's see where I have a place. Right, I have a little mess here at the edge, or I just want to really clean up my lines here. This can come in, and that way you protect the lines that are underneath it. It's not a very good eraser. Sometimes erasing can cause more problems than it's worth. But anyway, so these little guides allow you a lot of different ways to protect the lines you want to keep. And it works well for cleaning up edges and things like that, cleaning up all this stuff around here so I could trim it off later. But in general, I would try to avoid erasing too much, and definitely don't try to fix or erase a lot of stuff in areas like this, because you're just going to end up smudging more and causing more inconsistencies. It's better to work through them and keep as much of the drawing under control as you can. Remember to keep your pencil sharp. Do it every maybe 20 lines or so, maybe a little more depending on the lead you're using. Take your time, breathe, and use your tools. They're there to help you. You shouldn't have to measure too much. You should be just kind of connecting points in space. All right, thank you, and talk to you next time.